G'day legends, I hope that you are really well. I hope you had a great weekend and a great beginning to your week. Now obviously I have not uploaded for a while and it's been over a week since you've seen me last, and what I will say is, my God, I have been unbelievably unwell. In the opening days of my 11th round and my 11th month of chemotherapy, I caught a really nasty flu. Although I was given the option to delay the treatment, I made the decision to push on regardless, because I can just see the light at the end of the tunnel for this 12 rounds, 12 months, and all I want to do is get this behind me and just stare down the barrel of whatever we do next. Now, I'm also incredibly unwell because I have IV fluids and drugs to counter the chemotherapy throughout the week, but the precaution for me to go into the chemo infusion room, because I was so unwell, and obviously I could spread that, the precaution was wear a mask. And I said, no, I'm not prepared to enter that room, that facility, and put everyone from kids to grannies at risk because of my runny nose or how I'm feeling. So it made the chemo significantly worse, especially while I am immunocompromised. But I've been way too unwell to even think about this war, to contemplate complex situations, let alone sit down and actually make a video. So as much as I'm glad to be back, and I really missed actually talking to you guys every day and interacting every day, I am very, very, very far behind. So it's going to take me a few days to catch up. I'm still very unwell. And what I will say is the neurological impact of this treatment has become more and more obvious as it goes on just in my everyday life. At the moment, I'm not driving. There's certain things that I'm just not confident in doing because of just my brain. But in 3 weeks' time, 3.5 weeks' time, it'll be the end of the treatment and we'll start recovering and we'll push on together. And I'm excited for that. Now, I read numerous messages and comments and everything of support, and I really can't thank you guys enough. It does mean the world to me, even if there's no way I can actually reply to that. And a lot of people always ask about further support and this and that, and just being here, watching, even if you're criticising, critiquing, that's the most I could ever ask for. There's been a lot of people though asking, is there any way supporting outside of my typical links, which is outside of traditional payment methods, because people, and like I, don't really have much faith or trust in the traditional financial system. So I've done a little bit of hunting and I've put some links down below, which I have no idea really how this works, but to Ethereum and Bitcoin, if you'd be interested at all. I have no idea, but many people seemed interested. I don't know. So let's go over what we're going to be speaking about today, what I have missed. So of course, we're going to look at the maps. We're going to do a bit of a roundup on the maps. So what I've done is I've gone through like Syriac and AMK, and I've selected like the 7 most important updates that I think we've seen over this period. And I've also will scroll through the deep state as what has been changing. There are some significant shifts. We'll go over some energy strikes, that ongoing campaign that we see. I also want to have a quick talk about History Legends, had a great video up, but I actually want to just expand on that somewhat. Him and I spoke about this behind the scenes. I said, oh, look, I think this is interesting, so I want to go over that. But where I want to start is between the US, Ukraine, Russia, Tomahawks, all of that. And it does seem that Mr. Trump has somewhat come back to reality after, I guess, a bit of misleading and difficult to read scenes following statements a few weeks ago regarding that not only can Ukraine take back all of the territory, but they could possibly take even more. And today, it's being reported following a phone call with then Putin, it's being reported today, although this has been going on for a couple of days, that both sides should just stop the battle, stop at the battle line, go home, stop killing people. There's been a lot of reporting over the last few days, but we'll show some recent articles that have built on that as well today. But Trump has also warned over the past days that Putin would, quote, destroy Ukraine unless a peace deal was in place, which is very different to what we have seen. Of course, there's been a lot of reporting that Putin has somewhat relaxed his demands over unoccupied regions of Kherson and Zaporizhia, but still demanding to take the areas he currently doesn't occupy in the Donbass. But again, what I would read into this is I think that Putin is using the poison offer tactic of diplomacy. So basically a manipulative offer, an offer made that is to seem reasonable but is designed to fail. So look, I won't take these at what I'm demanding. I'll only take this. He knows Trump may see it as reasonable. It's to fail, so the US has further pull away. And in my opinion, we have seen Putin and his team do this on several occasions just this year. So let's jump into all of that. Of course, we do have a lot to go over, as well as further what looks like confirmation that Tomahawks are not going to be going to Ukraine. What many people was the wonder of it. And what I've spoken about with that particular weapon system is if it doesn't have that effect or it doesn't go, what then? Because the only sale of victory at the moment, the sale of victory has been almost now all fully reliant on those systems, leading to the collapse of Russia from Zelensky through to NATO. And it does seem like NATO's back a little bit. So there's a lot going on. And what we did see is one of the White House's official pages has spoken about this in relation to Mr. Jake Bro, a fellow YouTuber. He said Pete Hegseth showed up to the White House meeting today with Zelensky wearing a Russian tricolour flag tie. These people love Putin and Russia, and wait until people find out that red, white and blue is also the colours of the American flag, the Australian flag, and a whole bunch of others. And the White House has gone back, isn't it humiliating, so publicly admitting that you're a weapons-grade moron? But what I will say is this weapons-grade moron at one point in time was actually had some level of influence over your nuclear weapons systems, US, and you should be very, very careful with some of the recruitment we've seen, because some of your intel guys, Mr. David, to this, have a lack of confidence in some of those systems. But let's go back and have a look. Trump denies Ukraine Tomahawk missiles, urges both sides to stop the war immediately. In Zelensky's meeting, he's failed to obtain the Tomahawk missiles, which he believes could deliver a decisive blow to the Kremlin. And Trump talking about that, adding the weapon is one that America needs. And this is something we've spoken about. America seems to be on the precipice of larger war, or at least conflict evolving around the world. Tomahawks are a very important system. There's not that many of them. They can't make that many of them. And again, many people to about the 8% actually. It took longer than we thought, but I asked back in September 24, how long until the pro-Ukraine accounts again claimed Trump as a Russian intelligence asset and hate him again. Now, many thought it was going to be much sooner than this, but it's happened, as we have clearly seen. So let's go over some more recent articles in this. Trump warned that Putin would destroy Ukraine unless a peace deal was in place. Now, allegedly, there was shouting, swearing, and Trump threw aside Ukrainian maps of the battlefield and pressured Zelensky to surrender the Donetsk region to Russia, although there's been a bit of pushback saying this didn't happen. But he went on to deny reports overnight and called for a ceasefire along the current front line. The thing is, when you have a side that is clearly winning, who has then finish line goggles on saying we can take more, and if the question is, in 6 months' time, is Russia going to be in a better position or have more ground than today? The answer is most likely yes. Therefore, freezing along the current line is not attractive. If Ukraine was if in 2023, in the 23 counteroffensive, when Ukraine was makers of ground, if Putin stuck up his hands and go, let's freeze across the lines, everyone would laugh at that as well. The surrender of Donetsk is a red line for Ukraine. Kiev still holds about a quarter of the Donetsk province. The land makes part of the so-called fortress belt. Again, we will see how attrition affects this. In the White House meeting, Mr. Trump echoed Putin's talking points despite contradicting his own recent assessment that Moscow is a paper tiger. This is the thing, is if you say something that Putin has said, if Putin says the earth is round and you say the earth is round, that can be a talking point. But it is true. Trump is absolutely flip-flopping on this, and it's hard to get an idea. In my opinion, I think Trump is going off the most recent intel reports. And what I said back then a few weeks ago with the paper tiger thing, well, I think he'd been shown Ukrainian intelligence reports and maybe some contradictory ones out of his own intel agencies. And this is it, saying if Putin wants, he will destroy you. It was supported by Steve Witkoff, the special envoy to this region, who was among those aggressively urging Ukraine to give up Donetsk. On his return to Washington on Sunday, Mr. Trump told reporters on board Air Force One that the two sides should stop at the lines where they are, the battle lines. He denied in the meeting Zelensky descended into a shouting match, describing it as cordial. Now, again, we will see. I think there's probably some truth in a bit of the shouting match. It's a very hot topic. But again, this is the one-sided diplomacy. Even if Zelensky says, right, we may forgo that region, it's still going to take then the third member of this to come in and say, we're happy with that. And Putin may go, we still want the other regions, as we spoke about somewhat in the beginning of this diplomatic tactic. At the White House, Zelensky held his ground and refused to cut a deal that would leave Ukraine badly exposed. The Ukrainian president left in a bitter mood. The visit had not gone as Zelensky hoped. Now, Zelensky said yes, because Putin is something similar but stronger than Hamas. So he said that Trump needed to be tougher on him, although the decision and what we've seen with Trump working something out between Israel and Hamas, he said Putin is something more similar to Hamas. It's a bigger war, the second largest army in the world. So what we see is that Russia is so powerful when it's needed to be and not powerful when it's not needed to be. It's a paper tiger when it suits the narrative, and it can be defeated when it suits the narrative, and that we need all this when it's not. And this is the Schrodinger's Putin, or the Russia-phrenia that we're seeing impact so many decisions. He denied that Russia was winning the war and said that Putin was after more further tranche of territory. By any metric, I believe, possible, at this point in time, Russia is winning the war. Even if you believe in the metrics of taking more casualties and this and that, that's fine. But by any metric that I have seen, well, the metric of just taking ground, if you want to use that metric, anyway. Furthermore, they already don't understand why the leader of the country, which has the biggest territory in the world, needs some more kilometres. That's why I think this war is not about land, not about territory for him. It's about our sovereignty and our independence. So this is Zelensky understanding the actual foundation of war. Foundation of war has little to do with taking more territory, especially for Russia's biggest problem is how much territory they actually have to police and govern over. That's already a massive problem. But war is politics by other means, whether that is influencing a region of politics or influencing decisions about sovereignty, independence, the military alliances like NATO or EU or whatever. EU's military alliance, I'm calling it now. It's more economic than that. Sorry, it's more military than economic at this point in time, with the weaponization of sanction. But it's never been just about taking that. If it was just to get more kilometre squares, there's plenty of far weaker countries of which the West wouldn't give two shits about that Putin could have walked in on. Absolutely. Excuse me. So yeah, we just see this sort of unraveling of this. Let's then step on to so that's like the Zelensky side. Let's step onto the Trump-Putin side. Financial Times, how Vladimir Putin's history ran in Alaska nudged Trump closer to Ukraine back on October the 17th. And the article reads like it was just a rant going on about this with no information, none of this. And you're like, but it may not be important to you, but obviously this war is baked in history for Putin. And it doesn't mean, therefore, you can just disregard all of that. It doesn't mean you have to agree with it. You can disagree with it. But if you can't just go, well, I don't like that, so it doesn't mean anything to me. It obviously means enough to a lot of people there to be able to launch a war and have millions then fight the war. Let's go over some quotes, though, from the article that I found interesting. Trump arrived in Alaska expecting to strike a deal with Putin to end Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Instead, the Russian president rejected his proposal outright. Putin rejected the US offer of sanctions relief for a ceasefire, insisting the war would only end if Ukraine capitulated and ceded more territory in the Donbass. So there was an offer of sanctions relief for a ceasefire, and Putin said, no, this tells us a lot about the impact of those sanctions, like many say, may be widely overblown. But the Russian president appears to have calculated that as long as he has the upper hand of the battlefield, he has no need for him to make any concessions. Even his war economy is sputtering. I wouldn't use sputtering, where it's very difficult to actually assess the economy here, but there's other, by economic indicators, if you were to take France and this and look at debt levels and whatever looks worse. It does look like, and speaking to a doctor of economics and listening to the former finance minister of Greece, I believe, that this will be able to continue for some time. It's going to have more issues, but it can continue. And the calculation is, I don't need to make concession as we're going to get into a better position as we go on. Back to what I said, if in 6 months you believe it's going to be better, it's going to be very hard. You're going to have to then play the carrot, not the stick, if your stick's not large enough. Putin's military and security services provide him with regular updates, extolling Russian tactical successes, claiming Ukraine is suffering high casualty numbers and stressing Russia's resource advantage, according to people familiar with the matter. And again, the security services delivery of information, can always be a problem. And we see this, we see it more influencing where it's far more public on the Western side, that I believe these leaders, what they're actually being told, that they are fully believing that it's right about this. Well, there's been 30,000 Ukrainian CAS, 1 million Russian CAS, therefore we hit this line and it's all over. The same as we saw with once they're out of tanks, once they're out of missiles, once they're out of this, and the decisions are made on believing that the truth in that, and this can be a problem too with your intelligence service and skewed information. Now, along the Russian intelligence service, we don't know, but we do have information back from Soviet times that there was a skew of information feeding from the KGB into the leadership, and that made decisions that were rational based on the information given, but looked irrational once you knew all of the information. Now, the whole thing is ideological for him. He thinks he can win, the senior Western intelligence official said. And looking at all of the things at the moment, looking at the battlefield, looking at the problems evolving, why would you not think that you could win at this point in time, especially now with Trump? Now, Viktor Orban, he has put up that Budapest is the only suitable place in Europe for a peace summit, and it looks like with the next couple of weeks there will be some meeting between Trump and Putin, potentially Zelensky, but it won't be Zelensky, Trump and Putin. It'll be a shuffling, whatever they call it, where Trump will meet with Putin and Trump will meet with Putin, then Trump will meet with Zelensky following the meeting in Hungary. Now, there are questions regarding Putin's travel, how he would get there, and the International Criminal Court's warrant. What we have seen is obviously people don't actually give a shit about the International Criminal Court's warrants, especially the US, so that can be pushed aside for this to take place. But again, we will see how the European states see to this. We do know even travel for European leaders to go to Moscow, to go to the victory parade, that has been stalled too, so we will see. But what I'll say is the typical European leaders, Otto van fucking Ursula von der Leyen, they don't understand how this is a positive thing. That up until, even if this comes of nothing, but up until now, European diplomacy around Ukraine was being done outside of Europe. It was being done in Alaska. So it was being done outside of Europe, without Europe. At least this is bringing European diplomacy back into Europe. Now, there's this idea now that Russia and Hungary have this like history together, and they share a long, complex and bloody history, and they've never been close allies. And for much of modern history, Hungary has been caught between stronger empires. And I assume that my audience is fairly aware and fairly well read on the Soviet era 20th century history in this region, but it goes back well before that. History didn't start in the early 20th century, and even in 1849, Tsar Nicholas I, he sent Russian troops to help Austria stop Hungary's revolution, and it ended Hungary's chance at independence and left a long-lasting anger towards Russia. So there's this idea that these countries have been tied now together for centuries, and you're like, where are you reading this from? Now, History Legends had this video that I was very early to, and it's fantastic. The complete breakdown of Russia's 25 summer offensive. As usual, great video from Mr. History Legends. But the only thing I would say is I don't think it went far enough into the situation of attrition at the front. Yes, we look at kilometre squares being made, but the shape that's being made as well, enveloping entire cities, as Ukraine effectively has this no step back policy, and how that envelopment, not exploitation of kilometres, leads into that further attrition aspect. And while I've seen very little reason for Russia to collapse these pockets, if there's a no step back, you've created that then swarming element around, especially into winter as logistics become more difficult, and the targeting of those areas too. That we do know is further long-range campaigns. And Ukrainska Pravda, they've spoken about the change in Russian tactics in this. Now, people have said, well, what could come next if the targeting of these energy facilities, stops or goes? And the next escalation for Russian strategic weapons, there's still cards on the table. The next escalation for them would be all the bridges across the Dnieper River, which so far have remained relatively untouched. That is the next escalation rung on the ladder. Sources in the energy sector say that the nature of the recent strike and scale of the damage of the Russians this time prepared to act even more cynically. They say that Russia relied on carpet bombing in 2022-23, which is completely incorrect. But I think they're using this as far as just sending and hoping would strike rather than physical, what is actually carpet bombing. But now he's using stage attrition. The Russians are knocking out Ukraine's energy system region by region. There's local attacks on the front lines in Sumy, Chernihiv Oblast, and they're suffering the most. Then Kiev, Odessa, Mykolaiv, Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, and being struck less intensely but still regularly and methodically trying to destroy the energy system in its entirety. Local generation transmission through Ukraine, their state electricity, then taking out these both facilities making the electricity and distributing it as well. Another change, the Russians no longer launch one wave at once. As before, they strike in a series of drones, missiles, and they say it's a new tactic. Drone strike, followed by heavy attacks on generation facilities. They're using then ballistic missiles. We've seen most commonly the Iskander having a lot more success getting through air defence due to not only a shortage of air defence, but an increase in the Iskander's capability. So the Russians' overarching aim remains unchanged: to destabilise the system and trigger cascading failure, a blackout. To achieve this, they'll try and split the country's grid in two large unmanageable parts. So basically an east and a western part that would be unmanageable. So let's have a look at the maps. And we do have a fair bit to go over in this, but we'll keep it short, I promise. Here we have Ukraine, the centre of your screen, the capital of Kyiv. The red areas occupies as 22, the purple since 14, of course, the red check that you'll see. Ground being made over the past 24 hours. But of course, I've missed over a week. But if we just look today, this Velika Novosilka in direction of Huliopol front continues to fall apart. Even today, there are advances that are in the vicinity of around, say, 2.73 kilometres. We've seen that a lot of these deep areas that cut in have been then closed up. So what we're going to do is step back to when I last spoke to you, I think around the 14th, and we can just see the differences being made in all of these regions for the 14th, 21st. You just get an idea, not only into the western side of here, to the northern side, Zeleny Hay area, and as well the Novopavlivka, where we do hear a lot of reports of further pressure on these areas too. And this is what we're going to do, is look at different regions and then just go forward and back a week and see the changes. Now it's South Orokhiv area. I've seen many reporting this. AMK, he is also reporting this here as well. Of course, this is Orokhiv in the centre. That the deep state is reporting Russia carried out a series of mechanised assaults in this direction. So we are seeing more reporting, at least, of more Russian mech assaults. No large ones. I know that some of the reporting has been 50 this, 50 that, and the video shows 5. So rely more on what we're seeing, but we are seeing more of it in the direction of Malatok-Machka region. So in then around this region, Orokhiv, Frontline. According to them, the equipment was destroyed before it reached the front line. The infantry were able to continue the advance. The equipment was able to enter Malatok-Machka and scatter infantry. It's unclear how successful Russia was in the vectors of the attack. We should receive information in the near future. AMK has recently, more recently in that post, shared that some of the Russian pages are saying there was a success in gaining ground and scattering through Malatok-Machka. This is the problem on this southern vector, is this push west, but also the ability to push north in here too. So let's move then up the map. So we'll come Pokrovsk sector, go back to the 14th, come to today, and we want to just look a little bit of everywhere. So you can see further breaking into Pokrovsk, actual further shrinking of Kushetiv Yar, the northern sector. So from yesterday to today, all over, just this vice grip, nothing too significant, but we do know there is a lot more Russian infantry presence in Pokrovsk. See the grey heading right out into the very, very centre area. So we do know there's infantry working in this region into the centre of here. So Let's have a couple of quick looks on the deep state, the Suriak maps. He shows red zone right up into the center. Remember, Suriak, he's pushed back on a lot that say that there's control in Pokrovsk actual itself, but he's been far more wary on showing that than others, but he's showing advancement into Pokrovsk as well as on the northern side as well around Rodyansk too. And then we have his most recent update. So we're back on day 1334. So these are still a few days old on some of these, but he's showing significantly further control on the eastern portion of Pokrovsk. So basically to where this center line is down through Rehanativkia, that this area in here is under control. Again, it's always difficult to know, but this is why we just use as many sources as possible. Konstantinivka front, back from the 14th to 21st, just a small bit of ground made in here. Seversk front, let's go back from the 14th to here. Nothing on the Seversk front itself, but we see Liman direction. Now there's a healthy dose of grey zone in here. This is the sort of dose of chemo that I had last week of grey. See this growing in here? Let's have a look at how deep this grey actually is. And we're talking about 8.5 kilometres of grey zone in the forested regions in the direction of Liman. This creates huge problems, not for Seversk only, but for Sloviansk, for Kramatorsk, Dobasheve, Savnitohursk, all these regions in here. So keep an eye on that. Then we come Kupiansk. We've seen some small but very important advances in here too. So we go back to the 14th to the 21st, relatively small but important because a kilometre here, of course, is significantly more than a kilometre through a paddock, into confirmed advancement. So confirmed advancement on the southwestern side of Kupiansk and on the eastern side of Kupiansk too. And as you can see, this creates a whole problem for this whole pocket over here as well. So keep an eye on that. We'll bring up Suriak. He's showing that the majority of Kupiansk, at least on the western side, is coming under control. And you can see the problems with this. So Suriak is, and I think it's more likely, he's showing it somewhat like this. Of course, the Oskil River runs through here. It's going to be a problem to bring everything back across here for targeting, because it can be vertically enveloped this way or enveloped down from the north or from the south as well for equipment. And what we've speculated, and we speculated 6 or 7 months ago, that on Kupiansk we may see a significant amount of heavy equipment left behind on this side if there is a order to withdraw or it starts getting further closed up. Now, let's come into Vovchansk, and I know I would have missed some maps on this, I apologise. Vovchansk in here, go back to the 14th, then to today, we just see a small amount of Russian ground being confirmed by the Ukrainian map today. So we do see that over the past week. But what I will say is Suriak is showing that this is significantly more. On day 1330, in and around to the west of Vovchansk, there is a lot more ground being made outside of these then forested regions, right out into we'll see these like fire lines or fire tracks within the forested regions, that it's right out in these directions. So hard to tell, but it's looking like right into here there's further ground being made. And what we know is we can't confirm that. We confirm there's definitely some movement in the centre because both maps are showing it. And then up to day 1132, Vovchansk, Suriak, he's shown there's been significant Russian advancement into here, capturing, by looking of it, the majority of this. That the army withdrew from the northern part of the Vovcha River, and the Russians have captured this area. So, of course, the Vovcha, sorry, my map's on the fritz, the Vovcha runs through where my cursor is at the moment, that the Ukraine has pulled back from any northern part, and the Russians are now on the southern part of here, which is indicated by this map that they have moved from the just south to further south, but he is showing significantly further, both to the south but also out to the east near Tiki as well. So again, we'll just keep an eye on everything else. I don't think I've missed too much on that. Let's just quickly look at Sumy, see if there's been 14th. No, not much. So legends, I do apologise for my voice not holding out for me in this video, but I'm glad to be back. I hope I've caught you up on enough, and I'll continue seeing things as it comes through. Look after yourselves. Have a great day, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.